many of you to this spring meeting tonight, our second evening. We're here at the Meridian Center in preparation, and I'm going to just turn my computer around quickly, and you will see that there's lots of people here. Isn't that exciting? I feel like I'm at the UN. It's good for us to be together, and it's just wonderful to see so many of you in Zoom land. I can see all your faces and it's wonderful. I want to just quickly go over the leadership for the meeting, and there's a leadership slide that Michelle's going to bring out for us, which I need to actually be able to see. So Michelle, can you make that bigger? Because my eyesight is no longer that good. Maybe not. So I'm President Robert Lawson. There, she's making it bigger. Our Chair of Agenda and Business Committee is Wendy Loudon. Our parliamentarian for tonight is Kate Young. Our equity team support member is Yvonne Wright. And of course, our executive minister is Cheryl Ann Stadelbauer-Sampa. And our recording secretary is executive assistant Sue Dulabam. And on our tech team, we have Michelle Petic, Pratima Kudalakia-Kinting, Therese Samuel, and Diane Matheson Jimenez. So welcome everyone, and thank you all the team for being here tonight. Our churches are places that we go to, that we work at, and when we go and work at our churches, we do so hoping to experience the outward sign of God's grace in the word, liturgy, and music of our Sunday services. But we just don't go hoping to experience the outward sign. We go also hoping to encounter the real presence of that grace, to perceive and participate and enter into the heart of God. And sometimes that happens. Last night at our meeting, many of us were overwhelmed by the real power and the real majesty and challenge of Reverend Teresa Burnett Cole's presentation, along with our own Minister of Right Relationship and Social Justice, Therese Samuel. If you missed last night's meeting, be sure to watch a recording. It was an evening that was so much a gift of the Spirit that it flowed into many of us unexpectedly, like that so often wished for but elusive balm in Gilead. It was the church at its best, grace-filled, loving, listening, compassionate. It's my prayer for us tonight that we have yet another truly gracious experience together. After so much time isolated from each other and alone, we need not just words, but grace. And yet, sometimes what we hope for so desperately, and the place where we hope that grace might be found, is not safe. Sometimes it disappoints. Sometimes it reveals nothing but a cruel emptiness bandaged over by rites and offerings and words and hymns that soothe but don't comfort. And when this happens, we have a choice. We can bravely stand up as Jesus did and attempt to name and cast out the demons. Or we can do what is sometimes easier. We can put a fence around that spiritual emptiness, proclaim it holy, and attack anyone who dares to say otherwise. This evening, our topic is bullying, healthy pastoral relationships, safety and peace, not just in our outward world, in places like Korea, but in our hearts, in our faith communities, and in our spiritual and our corporate practices. As we prepare for this evening, let us confess that as Therese and Teresa reminded us last night, behind the nice sounding word, perhaps a word like mission, our United Church often twists Jesus' commandment to love our neighbors as ourselves into practices such as residential schools that had nothing to do with God's grace. And yet, because we were the church, because mission was divinely ordained, we refused to see the dark hole growing in our midst, and that allowed us to become spiritually blind. Throughout Turtle Island, the ancestral and traditional home of 3 Indigenous peoples, the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations, we set up residential schools, mission churches, and supported and encouraged the practice of adopting Indigenous children into settler families. Here in Horseshoe Falls Regional Council, the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Huron-Wendat, Adirondack, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe people, our sister church, the Anglican Church of Canada, built the Mush Hole in Brantford, just as we built schools and staffed them elsewhere in Canada. And behind our nice sounding words, we bullied and abused the very children that Jesus invited us to come to him so that we might be loved. So that they might be loved as we are loved, unconditionally. Today, as we work towards reconciliation, we do so knowing that we can no longer trust implicitly the idea that our churches, our ministers, our laity are nice people. There are bullies amongst us. And too often they use our church as a place to hide. Safety, sanctuary, and unconditional love require work, hard work, brave work, bold work, a commitment to the deep work that is true spirituality and vigilant discernment. And it is this hard work that I am delighted that our pastoral support minister, Kevin Steeper, and our Minister of Social Justice, Diane Matheson Jimenez, have offered to help us with tonight through a video they have prepared along with many others, especially our own Reverend Rick Brown, a committed anti-bullying advocate who spearheaded this project. Before we move into this session, I want to remind you that chaplains are available. If in watching this presentation, you realize that you need to have a private talk with someone, Kevin Steeper and Eleanor Scarlett are both here tonight. And before we start, I'd like to ask them both to put their cell phone numbers into the chat box. If you need them, they are here for you. And now, let's sit back and learn a little bit about bullying and the church.
This worship service addresses trauma-related content, including fictionalized depictions of bullying in churches, as well as references to biblical stories and news stories of violence. We attempt to address these issues in a sensitive manner, seeking healing. Attendance is optional. You are free to absent yourself before or at any time during the worship service in support of your own personal comfort. You are not alone. You are among people who care. On October 7th, 2019, in Hamilton, where I live, 14-year-old grade 9 student Devin Selvey was fatally assaulted after school in front of his mother and died in her arms in what was originally described as a school-related bullying incident that the school had repeatedly failed to address. Within hours, it was national news. When I heard about Devin, I knew in my soul that I had to do something to be part of the solution. That led me to volunteer on the executive of Voices Against Bullying, an organization which is having a very real impact on how Hamilton schools are dealing with bullying incidents. In the course of that work, I have learned a lot about bullying and power abuse in relationships from experts in the field. Bullying is not limited to children in schools, of course. It happens to adults at work, in intimate relationships, and even in churches. Reports of bullying incidents in churches have increased dramatically during the pandemic, both laity against clergy and clergy against laity. When we are either the victim or the perpetrator of bullying as adults in churches, we're often ashamed to acknowledge it and to ask for help. And we're often not even sure where to turn for help. Well, hopefully that's changing. The learnings that we have acquired in dealing with bullying among children are transferable to adults. And one of those key learnings is that nearly every bully is themselves a victim. Bullying is a form of power abuse. Most bullies have learned to abuse power from either experiencing or witnessing abuse themselves. Bullying is often a defensive trauma response, and trauma-informed empowerment strategies are successful in reducing bullying. In the biblical story of David, we find a boy who was robbed of his power and who grew to be a man who abused his power, and in the context of a religious culture that venerated him as a hero. Far too many people know how hard it is to accuse a hero of abuse. As we encounter the story of David and connect it to fictionalized stories of bullying in the church, let us open our hearts to God. Let us pray. God of compassion and healing, embrace us now in your loving arms. Open our hearts and gird our loins to hear and acknowledge the pain in our hearts and in the hearts of others. Open us to receive healing from your Spirit through the compassionate words and gestures of those who surround us in community. In the name of the Christ who called us to love one another, all your people say together, Amen.
In the call of Christ to follow him, there was no suggestion of hiding away from life's problems in the hope that they would disappear. Rather, it is a call to honesty, to recognize the dehumanizing forces of life, and to bring healing and reconciliation. Worship is our time for honesty and for equipping ourselves for discipleship. Let us worship God.
O great Jehovah, I come before you as your humble and obedient servant. Though a youth in years, I want nothing more than to serve you. It is you who blesses me with strength and courage. With your mighty strength I fought off bears in the fields, and lions too. Fill me now with your strength. As I enter the valley of Elah, battle cries surround me. The cries of Goliath resound over the hills, and yet I fear no ill, for you are with me, great Jehovah. Filled with your strength, I know I will be safe. But why, my God, why do they not listen to my pleas? When I was a son of Jesse to be anointed as Israel's king, my father ignored me. When your servant Saul anointed me, my brothers mocked me. When I spoke of the strength that you will provide, the warriors frowned upon me. When I came before my master Saul, he laughed at my young years. Now I stand before the giant Philistine, and he calls me names. Why, great Jehovah, why will they not listen to me? On every side I feel crushed. I do not know which way to turn. What have I done to displease them? I know you will not abandon me, great Jehovah, but give me strength, give me courage to be strong at the hands of others. Listen to your cries of your servant, O great Jehovah.
Hello, Therese speaking.
Hi, Therese. It's John calling from First Middle Duck United Church.
Oh, John, yes, good to hear from you. How are things going?
Thanks. Great. Well, actually, not very great. That's what I'm calling about. Something a little difficult is going on, and I wanted to talk to somebody about it.
Oh, my.
So I don't know if you're the right person to bring this to, but you're the only person I know in the regional council as staff right now, so I thought I would give you a call and see what happens. So, as you know, I'm on the M&P committee of my church.
Yeah.
And I was talking with the minister, and I'm starting to have concerns that a member of the congregation is putting some pressure on her to put hand sanitizer dispensers in the church, but we're talking really fancy, deluxe kind of hand sanitizer dispensers. She even wants to put them on the communion table with a memorial plaque in memory of her mother, who was a parish nurse in the church for 25 years or so. Anyway, I can really appreciate that her mother was a parish nurse for 25 years, but I don't think this is right. And I don't like the pressure that she's putting on the minister. I think she's threatening to push the board to reduce the minister's time if she doesn't get her way about being able to put these hand sanitizer dispensers on the communion table. And I know that if she pushes for it, it's going to happen. Reverend G and her husband have a new family, and her husband is taking paternity leave for the first while, and I know that they can just not afford to have the minister's time reduced. They would end up leaving the church, I'm sure, and I would hate for that to happen.
Wow. So this is such a complex situation and a heavy load for the M&P to carry. John, I'm really glad that you reached out for help. You are right. I'm not the person to deal with this. This is not part of my portfolio, but I am glad that you've reached out, and I can connect you with the staff people who can support you through this.
Oh.
So both, actually, two people, the pastoral relations minister and the executive minister, are both really gifted to help you with this. What I can offer is to contact them both, and then one or the other will get back to you to follow up. How does that sound?
Actually, that sounds pretty good. I'm sorry that you're not the person. Like I said, I just wanted to contact someone, but I really appreciate it that you would put me in contact with the right people.
Yeah, and you were right to call me, because part of my role is connecting you with the people who can help you if I can't. So I'll send it right as soon as we're off this call, and let me know if you haven't heard back from one or the other of them by the end of next week.
Oh, okay. That sounds great. I really appreciate knowing that help is close by.
John, I trust that they will be able to help you with this, but can we take a moment and pray?
I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Great and loving God.
Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near.
Welcome. Welcome, councillors, to the court of King Harkish. As you know, I have ruled this nation of Garth with wisdom and with strength for many years. And never in all my years have I known a man like David. I perceive this man to be manipulative, to be a liar, and to be dangerous. And I would appreciate your counsel on how best to handle him. When I first met David, he cunningly allowed me to think that he was mad. He scratched at the door, and he allowed spittle to come down his beard. I know now, of course, it was simply a ploy so he could escape, and I should have learned then about his manipulative behavior. Some years later, he came to me again to seek refuge from Saul, and he swore his loyalty to me. He whittled his way into my confidence, convinced me to give him the city of Ziklag. He was very charming. I did as he wished, and I can see now he was just trying to cover up for his dirty deeds. And now he comes again. He comes and he gives me reports of how he has attacked Judah and its allies. He even brings me spoils such as camels and sheep and donkeys. All appearances would say that he has proved himself to be abhorrent to his own people, and one would think I should trust him. And yet, I swear that he thinks if he lines my pockets, then he can do whatever he wants. I am convinced that he is lying, and he is simply trying to protect himself. I've even heard it said that David has used his own position to attack Israel's enemies, not Judah's. Of course, David would never agree to this, and he leaves no man or woman alive that could ever possibly say anything against him. I truly do not know what to believe, and I am just not sure what to do. I do not know how to handle his behavior, but I know that if I do nothing, if it goes unchecked, then it will be destructive. And so, I have called you together at this royal council to share with me your wisdom. What do you think is the best way to move forward?
Hi, Diane. I'm the chair of MNP, and I have a problem that I'm hoping you could help me with.
Hi, Nancy. I'm happy to try and help. What's the problem?
Well, it's about our minister. So the MNP committee got a letter saying that there was a problem at a recent worship committee meeting, and we heard the minister was bullying the members of the committee.
Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so committee members are still kind of shaken by what happened, and one of them has even refused to come back to the committee or even to church until the minister apologizes. We just need some help, I think.
Mm-hmm. So let me say first, I'm glad that you came, that you reach out for some help, because one of my roles is to support MNP committees as well as ministers. You mentioned the word bullying. Can you give me a few more details about what might have happened?
Yeah, sure. From what I understand, they were talking about upcoming worship services, and our minister was just getting more and more upset and agitated. Then the minister went off on this lengthy rant to get the committee to decide in their favor, to do what they wanted to do.
So in your experience, has this kind of behavior been brought to your attention before?
No, we haven't heard of any other incidents like this or any similar behavior.
Right.
Of course, we know our minister, like a lot of people, has been under a great deal of stress because of the pandemic, and MNP have been offering support, but there have also been a lot of extra other responsibilities the minister has had to take on to get the worship service online and dealing with our safe spaces team, things like that.
Right. Yeah. So lots of stress happening. When MNP committees get a letter like this that's signed by folks who are willing to stand behind it, I always recommend that you meet with the minister and discuss the letter, the contents of the letter, so that they are aware. Maybe the minister already realizes that they went overboard in their reaction.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think they are sorry about it
yeah.
and regret it. Yeah.
Yeah. So sit down, have a conversation with your minister as the MMP committee, and explore what happened, and if there's undue stress in his life that maybe led to this, or just to understand the context.
Okay.
And then what are you going to do? So part of it is you're making sure that the minister has the support and resources they need, but also how are the relationships going to be tended, having had this rupture in the relationship. So we always encourage the folks to try and handle this at a more informal level.
Okay.
Would the minister be willing to have a conversation with the worship committee about what happened, or write a letter of apology to the folks who were particularly distressed by the behavior? And it may be that they come to a better understanding and a willingness to work together again. There is a policy called the Workplace Harassment, Discrimination and Violence Policy that was mandated by the Ontario government to help create safe workspaces. And it is for our churches, both for ministers and other staff, but also for the volunteers, like the lay leaders who really work in the church on a volunteer basis.
Yeah.
So it encourages this more informal approach first, to see if people can restore the relationship and think deeply about their behavior.
Yeah. So
and how to
not
change
a
that.
Formal complaint kind of thing.
No.
First, right?
Right.
Okay.
However, if it's needed, like if it isn't possible to reconcile this way, it is also possible to make a more formal complaint under this policy, a complaint of harassment.
And that would be the committee people would do that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, the people who are affected by behavior. And in the case, if it were a lay person harassing a minister, for example, that would be something that would go to the executive minister of the regional council. But in the case where there's a complaint against a minister, if it's written formally, that would go to the Office of Vocation Minister. But I think, the informal would be more what Jesus talks about when your brother or your sister harms you, to go and speak to them about it. And if they won't listen, take someone else with you. Yeah. So it might even be that a member of the MMP offers to be part of a dialogue.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable and a good place to start. Because can we ask you for any help with the first steps in getting this conversation going?
Yeah, if you need, please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, Diane. Thanks. I really appreciate the help.
Okay. Blessings.
Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near.
I know. I shouldn't even be talking to you. If my mistress Bathsheba finds out, I will be fired on the spot. She's not been herself recently. She sleeps all the time. And when she is awake, she just sits there in silence. It's like she's so depressed, like the weight of the world is on her shoulders. She's such a wonderful mistress to work for. She laughs and sings all the time. And she's so much in love with her husband Uriah that beauty just seems to exude from her. But not anymore. Not since she visited David. I was there, you know, the day when they came into the courtyard. I just finished bathing and dressing my mistress, when all of a sudden they just burst in, and they demanded for her to go and them to David. My mistress knew that it was wrong for her to go to another man's house without her husband, and she pleaded not to go. But they grabbed her by the arm. What was she to do? It was the almighty David that was summoning her. She tried to protest, but they grabbed her so forcefully. As she left, I watched her look over her shoulder at me. I could see in her eyes that she was pleading with me not to say anything to her husband. I don't know what happened over there. I don't know what happened between Bathsheba and David. But I can be certain of one thing, that he forced her and he coerced her into submission. David used all of his power and his gender and his might. She was so vulnerable. What could she do? How could she possibly stop him? He does everything he can to take things that don't even belong to him. My mistress said nothing to me, but I noticed. I noticed the bruising on her wrist when she returned, when I was bathing her. And I noticed how she is swelling within. A baby within should be such a joyful thing. It should make you laugh and dance like she used to. But Bathsheba doesn't dance anymore. She's too afraid.
I'd like to introduce Reverend Cheryl Ann Stadelbauer-Seppa, Executive Minister, and she will be reviewing a complaint that has been received under the United Church of Canada Workplace Discrimination, Harassment, and Violence Policy. Thank you, Cheryl Ann, for your support. Please.
Thank you, Chair Lily. As Lily explained, I'm your Executive Minister, and in that role, I receive complaints in this policy. In any complaint, there are two parties: the complainant, the person who is making the complaint, and the respondent, the person about whom the complaint is being made. On March 1st, I received a written complaint in which Mr. David Solomon was named as the respondent. That complaint was submitted by someone who had worked with a consultant who had helped determine that this situation could be considered under the policy and who'd supported the complainant as they wrote the complaint to submit it. Another consultant was then appointed to accompany Mr. Solomon, and the consultant then met with Mr. Solomon to deliver the complaint and supported Mr. Solomon as he submitted his reply. Once I had these two pieces, it was clear to me we needed more information. So at that point, an investigator was appointed. Investigators are trained to deal with these matters, and the investigator then met with each of the parties, going back and forth between them to gather information. At the conclusion of the investigation, a report was written with the finding, and the finding was that Mr. Solomon's had indeed breached the policy and the complaint was upheld. That result was shared both with the complainant and with Mr. Solomon. The written report from the investigation then went to the Regional Council Executive, who made the following decisions and directed me to share them with you today. Mr. Solomon is to be removed from all positions of leadership until he successfully completes the boundaries training for lay leaders. Once he's done that, he is required to meet with 3 designated members of the executive who will want to assess the impact of that training on his understanding and his behavior. Additionally, the governing body is directed that you may not transfer his membership until he has met this requirement. The executive also requires the Ministry and Personnel Committee to participate in training with the Minister Pastoral Relations within the next 6 months. As the governing body, your role starts now. Your job is not to reinvestigate what happened. That's been properly done and decisions have been made. I appreciate that you all signed a confidentiality agreement before this evening's session. Your focus now is on how you strengthen and heal the congregation from this point forward. How do you help the congregation develop a code of conduct where such activities will never be repeated? How do you help heal some of the wounds and divisions that have been felt? How do you restore the congregation to health and well-being? Please know that as your regional council staff, we remain available to assist you with this. Any questions?
Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and welcome to this TED Talk on recognizing behavior. I'm sure that many of you here at some point have had an aha moment when you recognize something. And that can sometimes be a good thing. But what about the times when you recognize your behavior as being a perpetuation from something from childhood? And I don't just mean licking the spoon because your mother always did it. I mean those times when your behavior and your pattern can be destructive to yourself and to others. My name is Nathan. You can call me a prophet or a wise counsel, a doctor, or even a pastoral support minister if you wish. But whatever you call me, you need to know that what I'm telling you today is not a science. It is just a story that could be true of any one of you gathered here. Let me share with you a case study. Let's call my client David. David came to my office and he had the weight of the world upon his shoulders. It seems like all of his life events were somehow just catching up on him. His deep inner child that we all know so well had been treated by how he had been treated by his father and his brothers or his siblings. It was catching up on him. He told me that all his life he had to prove himself. And prove himself he did. He became a fearless leader. He became victorious in countless battles. He became a powerful and mighty ruler. But somewhere along the way, David crossed a line. He seemed to lose his moral code. He killed innocent women and children. He plundered foreign lands. He raped and took other men's wives. And of course, he lied, cheated, and manipulated. But what made him do it? How could a young boy who at some point had sung songs to God go so far off the rails? Well, as you ponder that, let me tell you this story. There was once two men that lived in the same village, a rich man and a poor man. The rich man had many, many herds, cattle, sheep, you name it. But the poor man only had one small female lamb, a small ewe. And that poor man loved that little ewe. He nursed it, he fed it, he kept it warm at night, he brought it up like it was his own daughter. And then one day, a visitor, a stranger, came into town to stay with the rich man. Now the rich man did not want to kill any of his own flock or herds to give to the stranger. And so he took the ewe belonging to the poor man, killed it, and gave it to the stranger. Well, you can well believe that that action of the rich man showed absolutely no pity. But ask yourself, what made him behave in that way? And could that behavior have been prevented? Well, as you ponder that story, ask yourself, where is my client David in that story? And why did he act in a way that he did? Could it have been prevented? Each of us gathered here have a story to tell. And sometimes each of us need to pause, to step back, to carefully look at ourselves, and to take time to recognize our own behavior. And then we can move forward with new insight. Thank you for listening.
What brings you to see me?
I need someone to talk to, and one of my colleagues suggested I give you a call.
Sure, what's up?
Well, this is harder than I thought. Okay. I've been slogging my way through the pandemic over the last 2 years, and I thought I was doing good. But the other night at the council meeting,
Take your time.
Well, the other night, I just lost it. We were discussing a small issue, and I started berating the other members of the council for their lack of commitment, for leaving me to take on more and more responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And how are you feeling now?
I'm embarrassed by my lack of self-control. But even worse, I'm deeply ashamed of my behavior, of the way I used my words to bully them. I put myself over them and judged them.
Use the word bully to describe your behavior. Have there been other incidents besides the one at the council meeting?
When I look back over the last year, there have been other incidents as well. I've cut people off and put people down, especially in those times when my decisions were being challenged. But the incident at the council meeting, it was the worst.
So how can I help?
I'm just so ashamed of what I've done, and I don't know at this point. But I need your support.
Well, I am here to support you. And the fact that you called me would seem to indicate that you're deeply troubled by what you've done, remorseful even. You've said a couple of times that you're ashamed of what you've done. Would you say this is true?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that there have been other incidents as well as the one that brings you to see me. And you described your behavior as bullying. So I'm left to wonder what was going on there? What was that behavior in service to?
Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near.
Today, we start by just acknowledging the ugly truth in our midst, for we cannot change what we do not acknowledge. If you have been hurt, or if you have caused hurt, please speak to somebody you trust. Your regional staff are here to support you. Peace be with you.
Spirit, open my heart to the joy and pain of living. As you love me, I love
And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord be kind and gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Amen.
Thank you, Rick, and everyone who participated in that video. We have some good actors with us in Horseshoe Falls. It's unfortunate that maybe some of the acting was so good because it was right from experience. When you see Rick or any of the staff who helped with that, please be sure to thank them. We're now going to give everyone some options. During the next 10 minutes, you may wish to join a breakout room, and we've set 3 up, one with Kevin Steeper in attendance, one with Chaplain Eleanor Scarlett in attendance, and one where people can just meet if they would like to. So they will be set up. And you're welcome to join one of those rooms to talk about how you are feeling and how you reacted to this presentation. Some of you may, however, just want to take a break and process what happened on your own. This time is for you, and we'll see you all back at, I guess, So we saw Cheryl Ann during the presentation talking to a church in a video about harassment and the harassment policy. And Cheryl Ann is going to speak to us live tonight and go over the policy with us with a slide just briefly. Cheryl Ann?
Thank you, President Robert. Michelle, could I please ask you to pull up my PowerPoint for me? We prepared tonight's worship and video presentation prior to a meeting of the General Council Executive this week, where the workplace discrimination, harassment, and violence response policy was updated. I'm not sure that the new policy is on the United Church website yet. Complaints received under the old policy will be handled through it. There's not a significant difference in the process, but there are 1 or 2 things that I want to draw to your attention. The new policy includes options for if a complaint is filed from international experience. So if your congregation has a practice of serving internationally, if there's a complaint that arises for that, the policy now has provisions for it. Additionally, the policy is quite robust now in its definitions. They're more detailed, more expansive, and consequently, there's additional information. One other addition to the policy is a set complaint form now that brings it in a particular way. What I'd like to draw to your attention, which does represent a change in the policy, is the responsible body. In the policy to date, complaints have come to the executive minister, and then the executive minister has determined where they should be dealt with. Sometimes it's something that rightly goes back to a congregation and we try and resource them. Other times it's something I might need to direct to the Office of Vocation. What this new policy sets out is very clearly who receives the complaint. So you will notice that complaints about members, adherents, or lay employees now go to the community of faith. They don't come to the executive minister, they'll go to the council of the community of faith. The Office of Vocation will receive complaints about ministry personnel. I will receive complaints if the complaint concerns the chair of the governing body or anyone else in a position that is accountable to the regional council or the general council office. The Human Resources Manager will receive complaints about Regional Council or GCO employees in general. The Ministry and Employment Unit will receive complaints about executive ministers. That includes, for example, you will have heard me introduce Japheth has an executive minister, the executive ministers who serve regionally. That's a team total of about 10 people. And you'll notice then a provision for complaints involving the General Secretary, involving the moderator or the General Secretary. This makes more clear where complaints go, but we're aware that this is a major responsibility for congregations who may not feel equipped. Michelle, could you move to the next slide for me, please? So what the new policy does is honor section J.5.1 of the manual that directs who is accountable where. But we know that this type of situation is very difficult for local communities of faith and their governing bodies. So please remember that if a governing body finds itself presented with a complaint, they're encouraged to consult with the regional council for support so that they can fulfill the requirements of the policy. It's very important that they address the complaint according to the policy, or to discuss the option of referring the complaint. A community of faith may always elect to refer an item for decision to the council that has responsibility for it. So you can refer a complaint to the regional council. That does mean, though, that you don't have input any longer on the process. Most importantly, I would want to encourage communities of faith to begin a practice of developing a behavioral covenant or a code of conduct that makes clear what expected behaviors are. Sometimes in the church, we mistake grace with tolerance, which is really for bad behavior. We need to be clear about the way in which we will speak to one another and how we will interact in respectful ways. Also draw to your attention that if you're familiar with the United Fresh Start program, there are 2 modules in it that are called Respectful Conversations, and we have facilitators trained in that who'd be happy to work with your congregation. Let's try and be proactive about being clear about how we'll be in relationship with one another, so that we can be certain about the ways we share information, speak to one another, and raise concerns if we have them. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to regional council staff if we can help you. Thank you, President Robert.
Thank you, Cheryl Ann. Marcy Gibson has a presentation for us. She's working on a project called Thriving with Equity, and we're looking forward to her presentation tonight. It's related to what we're talking about. Marcy?
Thank you, President Robert, and it's so good to be with you today and this evening. I'm just going to get the things off my screen. I'm going to share a couple slides in a minute, but I want to just begin with speaking with you. So for those who don't know, my name is Marcy Gibson. I'm a diaconal minister who lives in Hamilton, so in your region of Horseshoe Falls. I teach with the Center for Christian Studies, and I'm also working on contract with the General Council Office this year with my colleague Kimiko Karpov, who's in British Columbia. And we're coordinating the research piece of this project called Pastoral Relationships Thriving with Equity. It's a research project, and as the church, that includes all of us, we know that healthy, thriving pastoral relationships are so important. And we've been talking already some part of this evening about the importance of that, and also when those situations go awry. We also know that within that milieu, those relationships, that sometimes issues, particularly of racism, of sexism, of homophobia, of ableism, and other forms of oppression, can make those relationships more troubling or more challenging. Sometimes communities of faith feel ill-equipped to navigate pastoral relationships with someone who's different than many of them, or they have absorbed oppressive practices of our wider society. Sometimes equity-seeking ministry personnel in communities of faith have found amazing ways to work together and strengthen their pastoral relationships, including that thriving with equity. So we're wanting to hear from you. And this is the ask. Please, we're wanting to hear from you in a couple different ways. So in particular, from ministry personnel who are equity seeking themselves. So when I'll define that, we're looking particularly those who are racialized, Black, Indigenous, people of color, Indigenous, who speak English as an additional language, those who are Francophone, those who are disabled, in multiple ways, or in any ways, who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, two-spirit, intersex, queer, trans, non-binary, and female. So if any of those categories or many of those categories apply to you, we are asking for you to participate in this project if you are ministry personnel. As well, we're seeking that communities of faith who are in pastoral relationships with equity-seeking ministers, or who have been in the last 3 years. We're interested to know about the challenges as well as about the joys that you found in making your pastoral relationships thrive, so that regions and general council can develop better tools to support pastoral relationships with equity-seeking ministry personnel. So I'm going to share screen here with you. And then I'll put this information in the chat as well. So I'm going to start with that one. So this is the information again about if you are ministry personnel in the United Church, in this region or another. So this is a project that is happening all across the church, who identify as Indigenous, racialized, deaf, speaking English as an additional language, disabled, two-spirit, LGBTQIA, non-binary, or female. We're hoping to hear from you. And there are 3 ways that you can participate, and all of those ways are at that website. You can either push your camera onto the little code, or I'll put the website in the chat. The 3 ways to participate: one is that there's an online survey that is confidential. There is focus groups that are happening as we speak. So over the next month that are identity-based that you can participate in, or you can sign up for a time for a one-on-one interview with either myself or Kamiko as staff. So you can do one of those things or all 3 of them, depending on how you would like to participate as ministry personnel. Also, I'm just going to move to the other slide. Also, we have ways for communities of faith to participate. And again, as I said before, if you're a community of faith in the United Church who's in a pastoral relationship with an equity-seeking ministry personnel, or who has been in the last 3 years, we're interested in hearing about your experience. And so if you go to that website, there is a survey, an online survey that you can fill out as a member of the MNP or as the board chair. As well, you may be contacted through the regional council staff about encouraging you to have a conversation with us. Or if you feel like you have a story to tell and you want to reach out to us, you can certainly do that. So there are lots of ways of participating. This project started in the early spring and is continuing through the rest of the year, but the research phase is last month, this month, and a little bit into July. So we're really hoping that you will come forward and share with us your experience and your wisdom, and help to change the system that we're working with.
Thank you very much, Marcy. It's a delight to have you come tonight. I'm going to introduce John Smith now, our outgoing chair of the Staff Support Committee, and he has a recorded message for us about the work that they do on that committee.
Hello there. I'm Reverend John Smith, and I'm the chair of the Staff Support Committee, which crosses all three of our regions: Western Ontario Waterway Region, Antler River Watershed Region, and Horseshoe Falls Region. You can imagine how having really a very small complement of staff to manage and to oversee the work of these three regions with the vast geography and the multitude of pastoral charges and ministers that we have. It's a daunting task for anyone to consider. And so hats off to all of our staff who give and give and give. And frankly, this past year, they have just way exceeded our expectations. And thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't thank you enough to our staff. I'd like to just briefly highlight a couple of things as I go forward about each staff person. Lynn Allen was off on a medical leave last year, and we're so happy that she's back at work now. And while she was away, it took 3 people to cover her work, all of them part-time, of course, but we had Fred Monteith, Judith Fader, and Adrienne Robertson filling in and taking over and trying to fill in some of the cracks and holes that were obviously left when Lynn had to go off on leave. Diane Blanchard, our Pastoral Relations Minister, is retiring this year. We'll be letting you know about the celebration for her retirement a little later on. Diane has been with us a number of years and is a beloved Pastoral Relations Minister to many of us in the region, but also the former Hamilton Conference as well. While she was on sabbatical last year, McCall Cottrell from Hanover United Church was loaned to us for those 3 months, and he just seamlessly came in and did the work of Diane during that time. So we're exceedingly grateful to you, McCall, and to Hanover United for loaning you to us. Thank you so much. Kathy Douglas, our Minister of All Things Congregational, was also off on a sabbatical last summer, and wrote a beautiful document about pilgrimage, and you can ask her about that and maybe read up on that from the regional office. And Kathy, we're glad to have you back at work, and now that the pandemic is ended, a lot of your work, I'm sure, is building back up again. Sue Dulaban is our exemplary executive assistant who does all things well and somehow manages to keep good humor while she juggles the tasks before her, all of the administrative tasks and the 3 regional executives, all of those kinds of things. And Sue, you are the glue, and we could not have managed this last year without you. So thank you on behalf of all 3 regions. I congratulate you and thank you for your wonderful service. Pratima Kukadia Kinting is also one of those multitasking administrative folks that we have. And Pratima, you as well have exceeded our expectations, and you continue to learn and continue to grow. And we're so grateful to you for all that you have done for us. And while Pratima was on medical leave herself this past year, we contracted some work from Elizabeth Marshall from Antler River, and Elizabeth also just rose to the occasion and did everything we asked of her and more. So thank you, Elizabeth, for doing that for us. Ruthanna Mack is on stress leave at this time and is not yet returned to work. And in her absence, we have Krista Ford on contract to do some of the financial piece of the work that Ruthanna did, as well as Michelle Pettick, one of our other staff people. I'll speak about her in a moment. She's also filling in some of the cracks there as well. You can see that we've had to really juggle the work around to make sure that all bases are covered as much as we can. Diane Matheson Jimenez You are our social justice minister, and you have continued to inspire and create and challenge us with social justice. And I know that whenever we need a reminder about social justice, you are going to be the one speaking up for us. So thank you very much for all that you've done. In the same vein, Therese Samuel, who's taken on the other part of the social justice work, along with race relations and right relations, such a huge portfolio. We're so grateful to you for taking it on and for putting on the most interesting programs. And so just want to challenge everybody who's watching this to make sure that you do take advantage of both Diane and Therese as they offer programs that are really timely, front burner issues for us and our congregations. John Neff is our Congregational Support Minister in the Western Ontario Waterway region. John is going on sabbatical. In fact, he is on sabbatical just now as I speak, this first week of May. And we're so proud of him and so glad that he's able to take some time off, and his learning goals are exemplary as well. So we can't wait to hear what he will share with us when he gets back. Last year, we hired a new staff person, Michelle Pettick, to do web support and admin support. So Michelle has graced us with all kinds of technical expertise when it comes to the web and technology, and she has been instrumental in pulling things together and making our communications more timely and look better, etc. All of that you maybe don't even notice is done by Michelle in the background. Michelle, welcome to the staff team, and we're so happy to have you with us. Last but not least, Kevin Steeper is our pastoral minister. Kevin is also going to be taking a sabbatical later this year, and we're grateful to Kevin for his listening ear, his shoulder that many have cried on, and that he takes the time to attend many of the clergy gatherings and other gatherings that are being done on Zoom. And Kevin, I know that your work is so appreciated by so many, so thank you so very much for that. Just before I end here, I must say that our executive minister, Cheryl Ann Stadelbauer-Sampa, stands head and shoulders in the sense of in terms of her leadership and her service to our three regions. Somehow she manages to juggle all that goes on. She knows all that's going on in our three regions. She's involved in situation after situation which requires her expertise. And yet she does it all with grace and grit and good humor and energy and courage and strength. Cheryl Ann, you are a tour de force. Our humble thanks. Friends, if you're watching this on Zoom, now's the time to press the clap button or toot the horn button, and a great big thank you to all of our staff for their wonderful service in this past year. Take care, everyone, and stay well.
You may have heard that Kevin is the outgoing chair of the Staff Support Committee. I did some work with him early on at some interviews. He is an amazing man, and we will miss him. Deborah McGill, Reverend Deborah McGill, is his replacement, and we're looking forward to having her work with us as well. You will have noticed the name of Nicole Cottrell come up in John's presentation, and I'm now going to turn the floor over to the chair of Horseshoe Falls Regional Council's Human Resources Committee, Pat Tooley, and she's going to talk a little bit about Nicole.
Thank you very much, President Robert. Following the resignation, the retirement of Diane Blanchard, the staff Support Committee was tasked with the awesome responsibility of interviewing and selecting a new minister for pastoral relations. It was not an easy job. We received 26 applications. Of those 26, we reviewed 13, and of those 13, we had a number of first interviews, and we followed that up at an in-person meeting in London, where we interviewed 3 candidates for a second interview. The unanimous selection of the support committee was the Reverend McCall Cottrell. And Reverend McCall is not able to be here with us this evening or tomorrow, but he has sent this message, and he's excited to begin a new chapter of his ministry as Minister Pastoral Relations of Antler River Watershed, Horseshoe Falls, and Western Ontario Waterways Regional Council on August 1st. McCall was ordained in 2007 and was settled to St. Paul's United Church in New Liskeard, Ontario. While there, he chaired the Pastoral Relations Committee and sat on the executive of Spirit Dancing Presbytery and the Ministry, Personnel, Education, Settlement, and Internship Committee of Manitou Conference. Between 2013 and 2016, he served as minister at Allenford Park Head Pastoral Charge, and from 2016 until 2022, he served the people of Grace United Church in Hanover. In Bruce Presbytery, McCall served as chair of Presbytery and on the worship team. In the former Hamilton Conference, he served on the executive as chair of the pastoral care team. He is currently the chair of the Human Resources Commission of Western Ontario Waterways. McCall and his wife, the Reverend Jessica Cottrell, live in Harrison, Ontario, and we all look forward to working with McCall when he joins us in August. Thank you, President Robert.
You're welcome, Pat, and thank you for all you do on the Human Resources Commission. If we could all also keep McCall in our prayers. His church, Grace United in Hanover, is an emergency shelter for people in his community due to the storms that we had last week. He has a lot on his plate. I now turn the floor over to Reverend Kathy Douglas. And she's going to be joined by Diane Matheson Jimenez, 2 other staff members, and they are going to give us a presentation on the Korea Peace Appeal. And we're looking forward to that.
Hello, everyone. One way the dictionary defines peace is the absence of war. One way the word faith has been unpacked is to say, faith is doing things without knowing what the outcome will be. In the next few moments of your time tonight, we're going to ask you to do something for peace and to take an action of faith. There are wars in many places in our world, and we lament. No matter where the war is located, we are all too aware of the consequences: trauma and mental health damage, environmental devastation, and senseless loss of life, both human and other. There has been a war in the Korean Peninsula for 70 years. It is time that it ends. We here tonight have an opportunity to make a difference, to take a step in helping to bring peace in Korea. As mentioned, I'm Kathy Douglas, and I serve as Faith Formation Minister in the region here in Horseshoe Falls. And this is the introduction to your Korean Peace Appeal presentation. The leadership team working with me for this presentation are Eugene O, who serves at Trinity United Church in Thorold, and Young Suk Pek, who serves at St. David's Queenston United Church. As well, Diane Matheson Jimenez helped to put this together. I'm now going to invite Young Suk and Eugene to continue the presentation.
Thanks for having us today. We are so glad to share with you our thoughts about the Korean peace issues. I am Eugene.
And I'm Yong-suk. Nice meeting you. And tech team, can you please share the PowerPoint?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay, there is another presentation, like a PowerPoint. So can you please share the PowerPoint?
When did our fighting begin? Well, if you ask our mother, she would say our fighting began while we were still growing in her womb.
Can you blame me? Who wants to share such a small space with a hairy beast of a human for 40 very long weeks?
Grow up, Jacob. I was born first, the oldest, the birthright. The blessings of our family should have been mine. How telling that when we were born, my dear brother was grasping at my heel, a sign of the deceptive games he would play later in our lives.
Seriously, Esau? Give it up. I was a baby. Growing up with Esau was hard. He liked to hunt, like Dad. And he was good at it. He got all of Dad's attention and affection. He was constantly teasing me for spending time with Mom, learning how to prepare meals and to offer hospitality.
You think that was easy for me? Sure, Dad loved me, but Mom? She only had eyes for her baby Jacob. I heard you talk about me and laugh at my body hair. Once when we were teens, I returned home from hunting to find Jacob making stew. The smell was tantalizing and I was near fainting from hunger. I asked him to share some with me.
That's what you think happened? You demanded I give you stew. The implication was pretty clear. While you were out working hard gathering food for our family, I was merely preparing to feed all of us. Making that much stew and bread for our family isn't as easy as you might imagine. I wanted you to know the value of my work.
My birthright? That's what you asked for in exchange for a bowl of lentil stew and a piece of bread. That which was rightfully mine.
You gave it to me, didn't you?
All that's child's play compared to what you did to me when Dad was dying. Dad had sent me to the fields. He knew his earthly time was drawing to an end, and he asked me to prepare a meal for him so that he might bestow a blessing on me before he died. But why don't you tell what happened next, you schemer?
Mom overheard what Dad said to Esau. She told me that she would prepare goat and to cover my skin in the skin of goat. She urged me to put on Esau's clothes and take for myself the blessings that Dad had promised to my brother. I did as she told me to do. I deceived our father on his deathbed. I'm not proud of it.
And when I returned from the field to receive my blessing, Dad told me he had already given my blessing away. He told me Jacob would be the father of many nations, and I would serve him. There was nothing left for me. I wept bitterly.
In fear that Esau would come after me to avenge his loss, I fled. I left all I had ever known. I ran, never to return. And as I ran, I wept for all that had been lost. My mother, my father, my twin, my home, perhaps even a piece of myself. I didn't plan to return, but one night I had the strangest dream. I dreamed of a ladder stretching from the earth to the heavens themselves. Angels came and went from the ladder. In this dream, the Lord spoke to me, saying, I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When I awoke, I vowed if God would be with me, I would make the journey. I would return home, and I would face my brother.
And in those intervening years, much happened to both of us, as is the way. We took wives, had children, grew older, more gray. One day, after many years, messengers from Jacob came to me, hoping to find favor with me. The next morning, I met my sisters-in-law, the children of Jacob, and then I saw him, my brother, bowing to the ground before me.
Esau threw his arms around my neck. He kissed me and called me brother, dissolved into tears in his strong arms. So many years, so much history and pain.
My brother. My arms ached to hold him these long years, and now he was here, seeking my forgiveness, my blessing. As long as I live, I will never forget my brother's words to me. When finally we were reunited, after years of anger and grief and division, so much lost time, Jacob looked me in the eye and said to see my face was to see the very face of God.
It would be lovely to say that Esau and I kissed and made up and years of heartache were forgotten. Life is rarely ever that neat and tidy, though.
But that day, we turned a corner. We made a start. The walls that divided us came tumbling down. The lines of communication opened up. Finally, it felt like reunification was not merely a possibility, but a reality.
Finally, we saw each other clearly, beloved children of the God of mended relationships.
Brother to brother, sibling to sibling, nation to nation.
Heart to heart.
Michelle, there should be a PowerPoint presentation. Would you be able to bring that up?
Okay, here we go. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, once again, yeah, thanks for having us today. And oops, to try. This history is not a happy story to remember, but a story we can fix and build for the bright future. So the history of the tragedy had started from 1910, Japan's colonial rule of Korea. Next slide, please.
Korea has been an independent nation for centuries, but it had been invaded multiple times, the last being the period of Japanese rule. Between 1910 and 1945, Korea was ruled as a part of the Empire of Japan. Young boys under forced labor and soldier. Women were forced to be military sexual slavery by Japan. Japanese rule over Korea ended on 15 August 1945 with the surrender of Japan in World War II.
Next slide, please. And finally, Korean people heard the announcement that Japan would unconditionally surrender on August 15, 1945. All forces of the Imperial Japanese Army were ordered to surrender. Koreans were so happy to end Japanese colonial rule and to dream of having our own country. And Liberation Day is the only Korean holiday that is celebrated by both Koreas. However, the happiness did not last long. Next, please.
The Koreans didn't have their own government, so the two bigger countries came in to make sure things. Soviet Union controlled the north and US controlled south. South and North Korea has been divided by them. Let's pretend to be in Korea at the time. Imagine the line suddenly was drawn between you and someone else. No one cannot cross the line. Then the both sides started to hate each other.
Next, please. And the hatred became the result of the Korean War, supported by other nations. It was the first armed confrontation of the Cold War. Korea became warfield for the bigger countries. In 1950, June 25th to 1953, July 27th. So please remember those dates. So if you have a pen or a pencil, please write down. Yeah. Okay, next, please.
June 25th, 1950, the Communist North Korean army supplied by China and Soviet Union crossed the line and invaded South Korea.
Next, please. And in 1953, the Korean War temporarily ceased, but without a peace treaty or clear conclusion. Subsequently, a Korean armistice agreement was signed. Next, please.
The armistice agreement states in its recommendations that representatives of both sides would meet within 3 months to settle through negotiation the peaceful settlement of the Korean question, and etc. Until now, the peace treaty hasn't been signed.
Next slide, please. The pain of the war is still alive. There are a lot of people who are suffering by the division. There are also many divided families. They cannot meet and even talk each other. The Red Cross talked regarding divided families to meet and had 25 meetings since 1985, but it is not enough. Next slide, please.
70 years is enough. We need to end the Korean War and the tragedy. 10,000 signature campaign.
And the next slide. So the National Council of Churches in Korea, NCCK, has challenged the United Church to add 10,000 signatures by the summer of 2022. So we don't have much time now. So we need your support. And the last slide is, I didn't mention about it, but it's a quiz for you. So if you quickly write the answer, and I will find one. I mean, you can type on chatting bar, and then the first people will get this, oh, come on, this prize. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay, the actual answer is like 10,000 signature campaign, and the war period is June 25th, 1950 to July 27, 1953. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Who is the first? Maybe, yeah.
We'll figure it out for you.
Yeah, please, please. Yeah, someone help me. So
Somebody will watch
I will
that.
give a surprise to tomorrow. Please give the names who got answers. And Kathy, so we can sing? Yes, okay. So before we close this time by prayer, Eugene and I will sing one Korean song, not a whole part, but a part of the song in Korean. And the title is Our Hope is Reunification. Okay. 우리의 소원은 통일, 꿈에도 소원은 통일, 이정성 다해서 통일, 통일을 이루자. Let us pray. God of life, God of peace, God of justice, together we pray for the people of Korea and people who need your peace. In the north and in the south, for young and old, for women and men, for the powerful and the powerless, for those who have a strong faith and those who have lost hope, for all who thirst and long for peace, for a just peace, for a sustainable, lasting peace that can bring the gift of renewed kinship and friendship, for a peace in the mind and peace in the land, so that the peninsula and the people of Korea can be a sign of the justice, hope, and joy of your eternal reign. God, in your mercy, we pray in your name. Amen.
The link to sign the Korean Peace Appeal is in the chat. In faith, Not able to be sure of the outcome, consider signing the Korean peace appeal. Thank you all.
Many thanks to our Minister of Faith Formation, Kathy Douglas, for that. And many of you may not know Reverend Young Suk and his wife, Eugenio. Young Suk serves at St. David's in Queenston, St. David's, and Young Suk is working as a student. She's a candidate for ministry at Trinity in Thorold. And I believe they're coming tomorrow, and you may be able to talk with them then. We've got one final bit of business this evening. I'm going to turn the floor over to our Chair of Agenda and Business, Wendy Loudon.
Good evening, everyone. My business is just to remind everyone that any new business to be submitted to the Agenda and Business Committee must be in by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's Saturday, May 28th. And my email is there on the screen. President Robert.
So in leaving you all this evening, I look forward to seeing you by Zoom and in person tomorrow. And I wrote you a little poem. Bold, brave, daring, no longer indecisive because they scoff and tell us that we are stupid or silly. No longer afraid to be ourselves because they are bigger and stronger and louder. No longer trying to fly off the radar because when they notice us, they laugh and the shame is unbearable. Bold, brave, daring. Having the courage to face our faults rather than seeking a scapegoat. Deciding that it is braver for us to be vulnerable and real and human rather than being powerful, remote, and controlling. Having the pluck to stand up rather than stand by when we see the face of another Christ in our midst, hung up to die. Bold, brave, daring. Having the wisdom to understand that sometimes we are the bully, and that sometimes we are the bullied. The Lord bless you, the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face shine upon you all. And as the sun goes down, may the peace of Christ